It's a fiery Thursday morning in Nigeria with the End Bad governance protests kickstarting today across various major cities in Nigeria, and our correspondents have been monitoring the events and they will be bringing us up to speed with how the events have been unfolding on the show. Now, we will also keep tabs with them on that while we look at the minimum wage across Africa vis-a-vis the economic situations and the challenges faced by these countries. Definitely on the show, we'll touch down in Ethiopia to look at the World Bank's $1 billion financing support program and how it connects with the country's long journey to debt restructuring. You're watching Business Edge on New Central Television. I am Lekon Obanjo. Let's start with African business stories. High investment returns in the corporate bond market attracted 729.51 billion naira pension funds in 1 year to May 2024. With high inflation and interest rates, several investors have exited their stock market portfolios for more attractive new bonds and treasury bills in order to earn high returns. Pension fund administrators were no exception within the period. Between May 2023 and May 2024, the holdings of available for sale corporate bonds by pension fund administrators climbed dramatically. Oguchi Aguda, Chief Executive Officer, PENOP, said in an effort to make higher returns and take advantage of the higher coupons, pension funds offered more corporate bonds for trading to invest in newer, higher-yielding bonds which are held to maturity. Let's also tell you that the former Ghanaian President, John Dramani Mahama, will try to renegotiate terms of an International Monetary Fund bailout and boost local ownership of future oil and mining projects if he wins a new term in office in December. Mahama, who was in office from 2012 to 2016, will be the main challenger to the ruling party's candidate, Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia, with a good chance to win given a severe economic crisis that has made the government unpopular. Ghana defaulted on most of its $30 billion external debt in 2022 after the effects of years of overstretched borrowing, which were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, knock-on impacts of the war in Ukraine, and higher global interest rates. And in the honor of African nation, we tell you that Kenya's Court of Appeal on Wednesday declared the government's 2023 finance law unconstitutional, inflicting a new blow to the government of President William Ruto, who withdrew this year's finance bill after deadly protests. The finance bills, which are presented to Parliament at the start of every financial year, are the main vehicle for the government to set out its revenue-raising measures, including tax hikes and the introduction of new levies. The 2023 version was challenged in court following a round of political opposition-led street protests that turned violent after Ruto's government used it to double the value-added tax on fuel, introduce a housing tax, and even raise the top personal income tax rate, among other measures. And those are the African business stories for you this morning. When we go on a break and return, we'll take you through Market Watch. To stay with us.
Thank you.
You can see visuals of protesters of the End Bad Governance now marching to the Eagle Square in the capital of Nigeria, in Abuja. Of course, there have been talks around where they can stay to protest, and the IGP saying that there are some areas that have been designated for these protesters to converge on, even as they exercise their franchise as citizens of the country. But now it seems that these protesters have decided to move to the Eagle Square, where we understand that, according to reports, there are heavy security men in terms of military personnel at the square right now, has been directed by the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. But now that we see that these citizens, these Nigerians, are moving to the Eagle Square, we actually do not know what would eventually transpire. But the bottom line is they remain undeterred. They seem very resilient and are willing to take this particular movement down from where they were before to the Eagle Square, which is like the main center in the capital city of Abuja, to continue to protest what they call an end to bad governance in the country.
mutumin da muka da su kores har da wani na buga wani yaron nan da ce waɗannan suna gurin nan haba da su kada gurin
And now we switch, even as we've actually switched from Abuja to Lagos, we are actually looking at footages from the so-called ongoing protest in Lekki toll gates in the Victoria Island axis of Lagos, where we have protesters having a tete-a-tete with security personnel in Lagos right there. Well, we have our correspondent, Bernard Akede, who's also monitoring the situation on ground. And of course, it seems as though there's some sort of peaceful talks or discussions going on between the security personnel and the protesters. And we know that before now, the protesters usually converge at the toll gates, and that is where we've actually had protests being held right there. Right now, we have protesters who have actually converged in that particular area, and we have our correspondent, Bernard Akede, who will be giving us the details. Bernard, thank you so much for joining us. Kindly bring us up to speed as regards what the discussions are between the protesters and the security personnel as we see on screen.
Before you know it, the numbers began to increase.
Well, Bernard, we can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now, Leko? Can you hear me?
Bernard, we can't actually hear you now, but then we're trying to work out the audio levels to ensure that we get actual details from you.
Can you
but
hear
in
me
the
now,
meantime, you can see security personnel who are actually taking footages with their devices to document the situation as we see it roll out. Now, Bernard, I'd like you to just pick it up from what is actually happening as regards the protesters and the security personnel in talks, looking at the protests going on in that area.
All right, Nico, I'll just go on. I'm hoping that the audio is better and you can hear me. So there was nobody here before besides the journalists and the security operatives. And then a few minutes ago, a gentleman came and whipped out a placard, and then two more joined him. They were on a motorcycle. And then, you know, in the twinkle of an eye, this crowd that you see behind me is what we had here. And then we began to chant, end bad governance, there is hunger in the land. Initially, nobody accosted them and they were free to go about chanting, but as the numbers increased, I think security operatives now realized that it was time to step in. And in doing that, what you see now, or what we have here, is what we now see. The security operatives have stepped in. One of the police officers was explaining to them that there are designated locations that have been given by the court where protesters go. He mentioned Freedom Park and he mentioned Alausa area. However, some of the protesters say, first of all, that those areas are too far from the island, while another protester was saying, look, that was not given to them by the Lagos State government. They are not here protesting for the Lagos State government. They are protesting against bad governance. And that according to their constitutional rights, they should be allowed and they should be at liberty to protest wherever they want, and that the police will protect them and ensure that the protest is not hijacked. The police officers did say that that's what they are here to do, to ensure that Goodluck and South do not hijack the protest. So that's the dialogue that's going on right there. And these officers are engaging the protesters, speaking to them and letting them know that there are designated areas where the goods are where to protest. We don't know where it's going to go from there. We're hoping that it doesn't escalate beyond this point. But again, Nico, if experience has taught us anything, this is just it.
All right, thank you so much, Bernard, for the details you just provided at this particular time. Definitely, we'll try to talk more about this, bringing you on air to get more details from you. You're watching Business Edge anyway, and this is what is happening in Nigeria as we see it. Protests across different states in the country, where we see protesters engaging with the security personnel in the states. And as we showed you the visuals in Abuja, we just saw protesters marching from where they had initially converged, and they're taking their march to the Eagle Square in Abuja. And now we have Gospel Obele, who is Chief Economist at Streetonomics. He actually joins me from London, UK, who will be helping us understand how did Nigeria even get to this point? Could it have been averted? Gospel, good morning to you. All right, well, we'll try to see as much as possible to bring Gospel to talk about this and get his reaction. But then this is Abuja, the capital, of course, of Lagos State, where we can see security personnel escorting the capital of Nigeria, actually escorting protesters on the road. As we can see it, we see that vehicular movement is very, very low while protesters are on the street. Of course, we have the security chiefs right there alongside other security personnel and transports, traffic managers, also trying to ensure that this particular protest does not go out of hand. All right, so even as we're just showing you the footages or the video, live coverage as it is from News Central in Abuja and Lagos. For now, we definitely will be cutting across some other states to bring you more updates on that. But then we can see the security chiefs on a ground actually monitoring the situation, and it seems as though they're even also participating in the protest. But what is more important is to ensure the safety of the protesters and to ensure that this protest is not hijacked. What we have now is Admiralty Way in Lagos, live feeds from Admiralty Way in Lagos, Victoria Island, where we also see the protesters raising their placards, dancing in solidarity with what they are actually hoping to achieve. And what is more focal in this is the end bad governance, which has been what they've been preaching all the while. Now, let me quickly just get reaction from Gospel Obele, and who I believe has been following these particular events even as it unravels in Nigeria. Gospel, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, Leko. I can hear you clearly.
So I want to believe that you've been following the protest even as it started this morning, very early this morning. True to what the organizers, though faceless, have said they will do is to ensure that they speak to power and demand accountability in terms of governance. Now that the protests are started, what's your feel? Do you even think we should have gotten to this point in the first place, despite the fact that Nigerians have been crying for the government to stand up and do what is right for the citizens?
Well, we need a mix of everything. Quite frankly, protests are good. They're democratic. People have the right to protest. However, it would make more sense if people probably prior to this time engaged government, with more data, more evidence, advocated for what they wanted in a very strategic way. We haven't seen that. People just wake up one morning and plan a protest. And that's why you see the back and forth with government and the people, whether you should protest or not. So the conversation will be, yes, protests are required, necessary to facilitate democracy, but putting government in check in terms of accountability and all that. What's more important is, engaging intelligent advocates, which is a longer scope of work, a longer sense of commitment than just a one-off protest, as the case may be.
All right, let me quickly bring Oluseyi Awojulube, senior analyst at SPM Intelligence. He joins me from Lagos to talk about this. Oluseyi, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, it's nice to have you around. Now, what is fundamental for these protesters is a change in the economic situation in the country. They've talked about welfareism and a skew in what we've seen in government spendings as regards how it should have trickled down to ameliorating the plight of Nigerians and investing in critical sectors to have a positive turnaround in the country's economy. Now, we have the protesters on ground in several locations in the country saying that they want an end to bad governance. What's your take on what we are actually documenting so far?
Well, as Gospel said, protests are a fundamental right. They are constitutional as long as they're not hijacked or go out of hand. In Nigeria, I'll say that we've had this coming for a while, given how the economy has turned out in recent times, especially in the last 1 year, and even our persistently high food inflation from years back. So we've had this coming. The citizens are speaking loudly and they want the government to respond. The government over the past few weeks have been engaging protesters, and we hope that things will move past just talk and we begin to see actions that will
Oluseyi, okay. All right, Oluseyi, I'll get back to you in a while. Oluseyi, just stay with us, all right? We want to take this particular response from a police chief in Abuja. We'll get back to you.
Discussing in terms of the conduct of the protests and conduct of the officers,
he's perfect. He's good. Protesters are very. It's okay.
All right. Well, we just heard within that few seconds saying that the protest is going on well and it's all good. It seems there's some sort of understanding between the security personnel in Abuja and, of course, as we have the protesters also. Let's quickly engage Austin Azu, who's also in Delta State monitoring the situation. Austin.
Please don't cover me. All of you will sleep behind me. Wait. All right, we are live. Okay. All right. Currently, before the protesters who just began their the protesters began their procession from Interbar roundabout. Of course, some of them are quite angry and they are trying to restrict us not to, start our events here. Okay, just a minute. We'll meet them up, then we'll come up again. We'll meet them up, we'll come up again.
Okay, Austin. All right, Austin.
Hello?
Yeah, Austin, I can actually hear you, right? So I think there's a bit of decorum now.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, just go ahead. I just want to get your view as regards the agitation.
The
and
protesters
of course
started from Interbar roundabout. They proceeded.
We are not happy. We are not happy.
All right, guys, can you follow us on YouTube? Can you follow us on YouTube? Please, can you follow us on YouTube? Please.
Well, these are Nigerians in Delta states saying that they are not happy, talking about how the economy has devastated their businesses and how it has actually affected their lives negatively. And Nigerians are really, really not happy about how downward the spiral's actually gone in terms of welfareism for them. Now, Gospel, before I go back to Oluwaseyi, let me just quickly talk to you. You actually listened to one or two Nigerians there, describing how deplorable the state is for them. And this will boil down to the policies of government over time. And we've talked about this over and over again. The fuel subsidy removal, the floating of the naira, and all whatnot that the policies of government has actually, done. Now, we've also seen the attendant effects. How would you describe it? Would you say that the government has failed woefully in terms of what it's trying to achieve and the policies that it brought to bed?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you look at the state of the standard of living right now, it's really at a very poor level. And although there's a global issue around cost of living, standard of living, inflation, interest rates, and all that, but how different nations have managed that dynamics have also impacted on the stretch of that impact, on its citizens. So what we see in the Nigerian case is where you have, really worsening inflation crisis impacting on the everyday to-day living pressures of the average Nigerian. So you have shelter cost, transportation cost, food cost, and all of that, increasingly growing higher. And it also sort of, paints the picture that Nigerians are getting poorer month on month. You see the fact that price regulations are not in view in terms of, at this point and call, people necessarily cannot control prices, and you don't have an association or an institution or a government agency that have come out to sort of help to put price or cap price at a reasonable place. You also don't have sectoral interventions that are speaking to the direct cost elements, within this time and day we're faced with. Also take into consideration the naira and the dollar situation, where you have the dynamics of worsening exchange rate and how that has also impacted on the state of exchange in the country. So what I'm trying to say is that all of these issues, as much as they are global issues, are reflecting locally. They've also reflected in a more worsening way locally, and that could have been managed or properly reduced. Communication and proper citizen agenda setting, by NGOs, civil society, could have helped to also educate citizens. In the real sense, there was no reason why, Nigeria got to a place where people have to show up to protest on the 1st of August. All of these things we're saying today could have been properly managed and could have been properly phased out, and government could have probably shown themselves as more committed to handling the issues and all that. What Nigerians need is a strategic sense of hope and a show of commitment that you're actually dealing with the issues, and how you are actually dealing with the issues in a way that will improve the standard of living for them. So the protest you see today is not really the issue, all right? People are just agitated because what government should have done, they've not done. What civil society members and non-governmental organizations could have done to engage advocacy more intelligently, they've not done. So, and that's why we find ourselves where we are today, but it could have been avoided.
Okay, Oluwaseyi, now, of course, you heard Gospel there talking about how badly performed the sectors of the economy have been, despite the fact that the Nigerian government has tried as much as possible to secure loans from the IMF, from the World Bank, from AFDB, all these international institutions. But then we've not really seen it bring about or improve the value of the sectors, despite the fact that we even have the oil sector that has contributed more to the country's revenue. We now have an inflation that is above the 30% threshold, food inflation above 40% threshold, and Nigerians are saying these are issues that you need to deal with. How did the government deal with it? Basically, it's all about increasing or looking at the monetary policies and increasing the benchmark rate. Do you think that's a failure on the part, most especially of the CBN's NPC? Because a lot of people have talked about why not look at it from the angle of the fiscal side rather than dwell more on the monetary side that has exacerbated the inflation figures.
CBN side, or from economy in general, the fiscal side and the monetary side have to go hand in hand. So while the CBN is doing theirs, the various government agencies and ministries have to also play their part. So while the CBN is increasing interest rates, the government also has to do its part by addressing all the issues that are causing high food inflation. A major part of that is the insecurity in Nigeria's core food producing states. And so that has reduced the agricultural output. Farmers have also, like a survey that we did at SBM Intelligence, we found that farmers are having to pay taxes and levies to bandits and non-state actors. And so that cost also adds to the final cost of agricultural items and food items in general. So it's not just about what the CBN is doing. The CBN is doing what they can do according to the textbook. Those are the orthodox tools of fighting inflation. But it's not enough for the CBN to raise interest rates. It's also about what the government has to do on the fiscal side to address all the other issues that contribute to inflation.
Oluwaseyi, thank you very much. We are going to go on a very short break, so I want Seyi and Gospel to stay with us. You've been looking at the footages of Nigerians in Abuja, basically youths now who have decided to take this march on down to the Eagle Square, defying the orders of the FCT minister, saying that Eagle Square is not actually available as a ground that can be used for any form of protest. So we hope that this will not degenerate into some sort of squabble or fight or violence or fracas, as the case may be, because what is important at this time is to ensure that these Nigerians, as they continue to exercise their rights, are actually safe doing so. You can see at the background there, security personnel in the vehicles also monitoring the situation and moving along with the protesters to ensure that they provide some sort of protection as they had actually promised that they will do. But then we'll go on a very short break right now. I will just continue with the conversation when we return.